It's amazing because when people hear about learning about time management or productivity, they kind of feel bored about it right off the bat because they're like, I don't need to be more productive. I just need to get my work done. But at the core, what this is really about is it's about how can you be more effective in everything that you're doing. And like when I first learned this system, I was a little bit overwhelmed. I thought, well, there's so many steps to it that it seemed confusing at first, but only once I actually took a moment to reflect and understand how to apply it in my own life did I realize that it actually allowed me to do most of the things that I wanted. And so at the end of the day, isn't that what people want? Like to be able to cook spaghetti with a clear mind, to be able to, enjoy time with family, and to be able to get the work done that needs to get done and only do the work that is most important.
Well, if you know what you're doing, efficiency is your only improvement opportunity, and style. I mean, if I'm trying to walk out of the room, I'm always figuring out what's the easiest way to get out of the room. And I may not take that route. I might want to go boogie around and do, style and do some other things, but at least being aware of how can I use the least amount of energy to produce the most amount of result, which is really what productivity is about, or at least improving productivity. Everybody's already productive, Stephen. Everybody's producing exactly what they're getting. When people say, I want to be more productive, what they're talking about is I want to be able to get done what I'm getting done with less effort, or given the effort that I'm putting in, I'd like to produce more results. Either way, either one of those is an improvement in productivity. So I just figured, oh, what the heck? And I have to admit, my apologies. I've never had any traditional or formal education in time management, business, or psychology. All of my stuff that I found up that I wanted, discovering and uncovering and formulating all came from street smarts. It all came from lots of experience with myself first, and then working that model with a lot of other people. Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours, sort of behind the expertise in most people. I've probably spent 50,000 hours, quite literally one-on-one desk side with some of the busiest, best, and brightest people on the planet, actually implementing this methodology that I came up with.
And that street smart is clear because like this stuff works. It works for almost anybody who uses it once they actually learn just a couple key principles. But I've got a quote here, and it's one of my favorite quotes from you. And it's, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. I'm curious, like, what does this mean to you?
Well, I discovered in the martial arts and my own meditative and spiritual practices, 35, 40 years ago, that, having a clear head makes anything you're doing a whole lot richer and more effective and efficient. So it's really about stop using your head as your office. Most people are trying to manage a whole lot of stuff in their head. And I discovered 35 years ago, again, on the street, just for myself personally, and then working with lots of people since then, that your head's just a really crappy office. And now in the last 10 or 15 years, any of the cognitive scientists that have been studying how the brain works basically have just validated that. The new data is that your mind can basically hold about four things. And as soon as you have more than four things you're kind of trying to keep track of or prioritize or manage the relationship between, you're going to sub-optimize your cognitive process. You're not going to be as smart as you could be. You're not going to be as quick as you could be. You're not going to be as present as you could be. And so, hey, duh, it's just kind of the way the mind doesn't work. Your mind did not evolve to remember, remind, prioritize, or manage relationships between more than four things. It does that very well, by the way. Your mind evolved so that you could use long-term history and pattern recognition to say, oh, there's a tiger over there. There's strawberries in the bush. There's a thunderstorm coming. The baby's crying. Yeah, you do that. You're doing that right now. That's why you think that's a microphone and that this is a podcast as opposed to just vibrations of light and sound. You're doing pattern recognition and long-term history and making sense out of your world. The computers can't even start to do that. They're starting to do a tiny little bit of it. But then you go to the store for lemons and you come back with 6 things and no lemons. What happened? You tried to use your head as your office and it just doesn't work very well.
So you've got to get those things out of your head. And there's a clear process to this. And for those people who don't know about GTD, like I keep saying, it's really a way of thinking. And when you can get that way of thinking to start happening and you follow this process, things start being much simpler, to organize your to-dos and your priorities. But David, will you tell us a little bit about this way of thinking and kind of give us a little bit of an overview?
Yeah. And Stephen, I didn't make this up. I recognized it. Everybody listening or watching to this at some point felt confused or overwhelmed at some point and sat down and made a list and felt better, felt more controlled, more focused about whatever it was. And so if anybody reverse engineered all that, they never keep anything in their head again. There's nothing changed in their world. Except what changed was how they are engaged with their world. So I just started to recognize what it is that we do that allows us to disengage with our world, but in an effective way. In other words, there's a lot of stuff you don't have to complete to get them off your mind, but you do have to capture them, clarify them, organize the results of that thinking in some trusted way. That gets it off your mind. Most people listening or watching this are probably not worried about or thinking about where they need to be 2 weeks from Wednesday at 3:00 in the afternoon. Why? They have a system. It's called a calendar. They've got the content in there that they trust needs to be there, and they trust they have a behavior that will look at the content at the right time. Well, duh. So anybody who says you don't need to get stuff out of your head and create appropriate lists of things you need to be reminded of at the right time, you're kidding yourself. They're intellectually dishonest. Or either that or just throw away your calendar and say, oh, my head can do it all. Fine, go right ahead. But so the basic process is to there's a 5-step thing of the way we get control of any kind of a situation. You need to identify or capture the stuff that's got your attention in the situation. What's got my attention about my work, my life, my family, the pandemic that's going on, whatever. What's on my mind about any of that? So you have to identify what those things are, write them down, get them out of your head, capture them some way. And then step 2, you need to make some real clear decisions about what those things mean and what you're going to do about them, if anything. You're actually going to do something about researching karate lessons for your kids? You're actually going to do something about hiring a VP of marketing? You're actually going to do something about getting a divorce or not? What are you going to do about those things? So that's step 2 is clarify. Is it an actionable item, yes or no? If it's not, then you'd reference it, you trash it, or you just park it and incubate it in some place you'll see it later on. If it is something that's actionable, you need to decide what's the very next action you would need to take. Very specific next action. Is that an email to send? Is that a website to surf? Is that a conversation to have with your life partner? What's the next thing you would need to do if you're going to move the needle toward closure on whatever this thing is that has your attention? And if one action won't finish it, what's the project you need to keep track of until it's done? So determining whether it's trash, reference material, or incubate, or if it is an actionable item, what's the next action? And if one action won't finish it, what's the project? That's the thinking process. That's really where the power of this model is. And I didn't make that up. I just recognized it. That's how you get your kitchen under control, is how you get your company under control, is how you get your consciousness under control. You capture, you clarify, you organize, stuff in some appropriate place. You then reflect and review what's the content of that, so that then you're making good, trusted choices about what you do, as opposed to just being driven by whatever's latest and loudest in your world. So again, I just recognize those 5 steps. It's not one thing. It's not go prioritize or go get organized. Yeah, those are some key components that come in there. But most people's organization is just rearranging incomplete piles of unclear things. So that doesn't help at all. You really have to, it's a holistic model. You really need to do all of that. If you're going to get your kitchen under control, you need to if you walk in and you've got guests coming in an hour and your kitchen's out of control, first thing you notice is what's off, what's not on cruise control. Yeah, that's right. Then what do you do? Well, that's a dirty dish. That's a clean dish. Those are spices. Those are whatever. You clarify what those things are that are off. Then what do? You put those things where they go. You organize the dirty dishes in the dishwasher. You put the spices back where spices go. You organize, and then you step back and reflect on the situation. Okay, and say, okay, and what are we going to do? And what time is it? And okay, and you pull out butter and you start to create some appetizers. All right, so I didn't make that up. I just recognized it. But those are 5 very different phases and very, very different practices, each one of which has its own tools and its own best practices.
If you're an accredited investor and you're interested in learning more about our investment opportunities, the exact types of investments that I personally invest in, then head over to theinvestormindset.com/invest or send me an email at steven@vonfinch.com. That's VonFinch.com. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Head over to theinvestormindset.com to join the Insider Club, where we share tools and strategies from the top investors and entrepreneurs on how to take it to the next level.